Hey, Brad, welcome to the show as a way of getting started. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Brad Smith. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Codeless. We are a content production company, and we do about 250 kind of long form articles a month, and we're doing video and getting into a bunch of other types of spaces. And so we help a lot of SaaS companies, affiliate companies, service companies basically just grow traffic and leads and revenue.
Cool. How'd you get into this?
My background is more on the SEO side, and as you know, the past decade or so has become a lot more complex. And so, what we were finding is that we really wanted to specialize and become really, really good at one particular aspect of that, kind of one sub aspect of that. And so, we started focusing on content almost accidentally, in that I was writing for a lot of big marketing sites just as a way to get recognition and try to promote the other services that we were providing at the time. And that kind of snowballed, where I started writing for one big site like Ad Espresso, and then another big site like WordStream came along, and then another one like Kissmetrics came along, and then everyone was asking me to write, and my personal bandwidth was shrinking. And then I wised up and said, oh, there's probably this demand here, there's probably this need here, where a lot of these big companies now need a very specific type of content that performs really well for them and makes a lot of sense for them, and then we can make kind of like a business out of it. So it kind of started out almost accidentally, and then it's grown a lot kind of since then, strategically.
Cool. And you have a passion for writing, or?
Yeah. I don't write as much anymore, unfortunately, but I always did. I always thought it was. I think I became pretty good at taking complex subjects and then explaining them in kind of like an interesting, easy to follow way. And
Yeah.
I always thought it was fun to inject personality into it too, and to inject sarcasm and dumb inside jokes, and just try to take something that's usually so boring and mundane
Yeah.
and technical and make it fun and interesting. And that seemed to really resonate with people. And that made me feel good, when people like what you do. It's more fun to do. So.
Cool. And how has this space changed? Because I seen it, it ebbs and it flows, and the platforms change and the formats change. The listicles have kind of
Yes.
got burnt out, I think.
Hopefully. Yeah. So it's changed a lot. We, go back 15 years ago or whatever, and there wasn't any content. And so people were saying, oh, you just need to create any kind of content and you'll get
Yes.
found. And today that world is a lot different. It's a lot more formalized. The competition is a lot savvier. There's a lot more money in it. So the lengths that you typically go to have to be a little more extreme too. So where maybe even 5 years ago, you would work with like one content creator, or you could kind of write the stuff yourself, and it could be 500 words, and that's evolved a lot. So now you need multiple people involved. Like our team has subject matter experts who are the writers, plus editors, plus copy editors who are checking for grammar, plagiarism, plus designers, plus account managers. So all of a sudden, it's definitely more of like a team-oriented approach, where for us, we tend to go a lot longer than most people. We tend to also do a lot more volume for some people. And then, as I alluded to earlier, we're introducing more stuff all the time, like other media types like video, audio, into the actual content we're already doing. So it's
Yeah.
the actual content deliverable is becoming a lot more, I don't know, complex in a way, but hopefully a lot more useful to like the end person who's reading it or consuming it.
Yeah, because that's what I found. It, depending on your market, depends on the format that they consume.
Yep.
I do a lot with marketing and salespeople. Salespeople, it's almost 100% audio.
Yep.
If it's not audio, then if you wrote a book, they're going to either listen to it or browse through it. They're not going to really read it. But
Totally.
then, software engineers or executives want to read.
Yep.
Are you finding correlations between like profiles and formats?
Definitely. Yeah. Executives also don't have time for a webinar, for example, but
Right.
like SMBs do have time for a webinar. And so definitely the format impacts who you're trying to reach. On the consumer side, we would not write as much, as long or as detailed stuff. It would be much shorter, much punchier. And then another interesting aspect is tools too. So a lot of people don't always think of tools as content, but calculators, useful assets like that can help someone like a salesperson get the information across without forcing someone to sit down and read through, 3,000 words on some dry topic.
Oh yeah, tools definitely. Is that something you guys have dabbled in, or?
Yeah, we'll work with developers and create some custom stuff. We're trying to get into a lot more data visualization too. So you've probably seen infographics is like
Graphics.
kind of step one. It's like
Yeah.
surface level. Where we'd love to get into a lot more is a lot more interactive media, because I think, like you're saying, that makes it a lot more interesting to the person who needs to receive that stuff. It makes a better impression too. So if you're thinking of like just simple recognition, that happens a lot easier when you get interaction, as opposed to when someone just Googles a basic topic and then reads 5 articles that all kind of sound the same more or less. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's where the world is going, is more video, more interaction, and getting the information across that way versus just like spinning up a 10,000 word article on
Yeah. The
something no one.
ultimate guide on this or
Yeah,
that. Right.
yeah, exactly.
The
And
definitive
hopefully,
guide.
yeah, exactly. And hopefully less list posts, like you said too.
Yeah, because those I find zero value to. You know.
Yeah, I find the only way you make those interesting today is if you're doing something compelling with the information. And so I know a friend of mine runs growth at this one company called Candor, and they put together this huge and the same content formats we've been doing for decades now.
And how do people find out about you other than word of mouth?
A lot of it's word of mouth, because we work with a lot of big teams and marketing companies. We also work a lot with consultants, so people who might be like growth consultants who help bring us in. We also do a lot of writing though. So if most people find us through like more cold methods, they're seeing our work typically on some of these big marketing sites. I've personally written for pretty much like every big marketing site in the space. And so that's usually how people are finding us, through, if they're already looking for anything around marketing content and where it's going and how it's evolving.
And
Typically you'll run into us somewhere.
and how can you tell if it's a good match? Because you know, there's all kinds of schools. You get like the people who say just hire a journalist grad who can't get a job,
Yep.
and they just copy everybody else's definitive guide and listicle,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they
Go
have
ahead.
no domain experience whatsoever, and it's just really just rewording somebody else's stuff.
For sure. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that approach. We work with subject matter experts. So a lot of people we work with are, if we're hiring someone to talk about commercial real estate, that person probably practices commercial real estate. And so
Yeah.
they're almost doing it as a side project. We've hired marketing writers who write full time now, who actually ran paid campaigns for people in the past. And so depends a little bit on the space that you're in, but I find it's often easier to take a subject matter expert and pair them with a writer even,
Yeah.
or help them understand basic writing concepts, because a lot of times the content that a company needs, that a business needs, it doesn't have to read like an amazing narrative from the New
No,
Yorker.
no, it
It
doesn't.
needs to get across simple ideas. It needs to convey a message. It needs to connect to a call to action. It needs to like be a lot more kind of basic or fundamental from the writing aspect. So I like to do subject matter experts. And then depending on the company and their approach, sometimes in-house people work better, sometimes agency work better, sometimes freelancers work better. I think there's pros and cons of each of those approaches. So it kind of depends a little on
Yeah.
everyone's scenario.
And when can you tell that it's just not a match? If they all they care about is cost, or they just
Yeah, pretty early. Cost is one aspect. I
yeah,
think cost is relative. That's the way I like to describe it. So an agency is always going to seem expensive, but it's not as expensive when you consider how many people on the team are actually working on one account versus hiring that internally, for
I
instance.
can't do it right.
Or even if you're working with freelancers, a lot of times a freelancer will just be good at one thing. They'll just be good at writing, for instance, but not editing, design, project management. So you have to still have some internal resources for that. A freelancer might top out at 2-3 articles a week, whereas an agency could scale up a lot higher. And so there is cost is relative in that if you're getting the value for what you're paying, then it's usually a good deal no matter which bucket you're putting it in. Also, too, the type of writing I've seen. So for us, a lot of the writing we do is very performance focused. And so we tend to work better with like SEO people or growth people or people who are focused on like revenue and results, versus some people who are looking for copywriters or more brand writing.
Yeah.
Tends to be a lot more about like capturing brand voice, style, a lot more intangibles that are tough for an external agency or external people to immediately understand without, living and breathing in the company. So style of writing is a huge thing I've seen too.
Yeah. And who is the point of contact at these companies? Is it the CMO? Is it the content manager? Is it demand gen?
For us, it's usually demand gen or CMO. Demand gen sometimes falls under like growth, sometimes falls under product, sometimes falls under SEO, depending on the company and how they're set
Yeah.
up. We deal with, and then usually our point of contact might be someone lower, someone managing more of like this blog or this type of content. But usually the person signing off on the budget is someone a little higher. Yeah.
And what are they looking for? Is it typically a blog, or is it more of an ebook? Is it more a
Most of
strategy?
Yeah, a little strategy for sure. Sometimes companies might have that already. Sometimes they have people in house who can do that. Otherwise, we usually pick up the slack. So sometimes it's collaborative where we say, hey, give us this initial direction of where you're looking to go and these initial topic ideas. We'll go do the extra research and actually figure out what the potential is, which things are too competitive, which things you should be able to compete for, where there might be some low-hanging fruit to go back and optimize or improve. And generally for us, again, it tends to be a lot of at least blog or on-site content. So it doesn't have to be content that lives on a blog per se, but it's typically content that lives on a website that's going to impact SEO. So that's always kind of like the underlying thing, because in that sense, content should be an asset. And so it should be something that you're able to invest in. There's a payback period.
Right.
It's not within 3 months, but it's within 12 months, 24 months, and it's not an expense or ephemeral content that's going to disappear after a few weeks and never be heard from again.
Yeah, because that's the big mistake I see is people make it like the news instead of evergreen.
Yep.
And then you just get on this treadmill of having to put out 3 posts a week, and they're very current and they just expire.
Yep.
Right.
For sure. And that happens too, even with places like LinkedIn now, especially in the B2B space, where people are spending so much time and energy creating content just for LinkedIn, which is good. But in an ideal world, that stuff should be based on existing content assets you already have that live somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you're able to just repurpose the same messaging, same themes. It should decrease the cost and time to create that stuff, but it should also then relate back to what you want people to do eventually, which is to fill out a
Engage
lead
with it,
sign up. Exactly. Yeah. Like otherwise the risk you run with something like it's LinkedIn content is no different from Facebook content, Twitter content, AOL content back in the day where you have brand pages. The visibility always goes to zero on all these platforms at some point, and you have to pay for it. And so it might work now and it might work this year, but 5 years from now, are you still gonna get the same ROI? No.
Well, that's it. Because if you're not, on that wave has probably crashed you right now.
Yep.
Which has happened already in Facebook. LinkedIn, if you know the algorithm, you focus on like text posts and you have an audience and you stay engaged, it'll populate, it'll get seen.
Yep.
But I don't know if you remember Pulse.
Yes.
Pulse was hot as could be that one summer.
Yep.
And people got great followings.
Yep.
And that now it's worthless.
Yeah, and weren't SlideShares pretty good for Pulse back in the day too?
They were great too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's all these little loopholes. I know, fairly recently, maybe in the last 6 months, if you put the link not in the content but in the first comment, that's supposed to help with the algorithm. You can do these little tricks for only so long, and ultimately at the end of the day, you should still explore them. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying don't invest 100% of your time there, maybe, because at the end of the day, you don't own that asset. It's going to go away. It's going to disappear. So there needs to be some way you're still filtering or getting that stuff back to like your main site, things you do.
Something you have control over. Yeah. And what do you see resonating the most? Is it a great subject line? Is it just great writing? Is it really
in LinkedIn specifically, or in other
on blog posts, on private content?
Yeah, I think the angle makes such a difference. So like if your topic is, I don't know, Google Analytics, or just marketing data in general, the angle you take on that topic is so important, because there's probably, how many million posts on Google Analytics already and marketing data. And so if I come out with like if you look and you see the top 10 posts on this already are how to list, how to, they're all going to be the same. But if you can come up with a contrarian angle on that, like here's why your Google Analytics data is all wrong, it's immediately going to jump out, and it's immediately going to break that pattern interruption you need to kind of stand out. So from like a quality perspective or from a reader perspective, not thinking through like SEO, because that might not be great for an SEO title, but just from getting people to read your thing, it needs to be fundamentally, you need to have a different perspective on it that isn't just simply regurgitating what everyone else is already saying.
Something provocative or counterintuitive?
Potentially, if it makes sense. I think that's you don't want to be provocative just to be provocative. Yeah. But with Google Analytics, there are a ton of loopholes. There are a ton of issues with most people's analytics setups that are probably wrong. And so if you extrapolate that, you're making decisions based on bad data, which means your decisions are bad, which means the money you're putting behind, the resources you're putting behind those things become flawed. And so there is like a fundamental problem that you need to highlight, and that you can kind of not exaggerate, but be a little more hyperbolic, and it makes sense because it's valid, versus just like, like the same, making fun of LinkedIn again, just going back to the same, like, oh, this XYZ is a game changer, and this is so epic, and this is all the same kind of junk that people just roll their eyes at because it's not true.
and how do your clients measure success?
It depends where they're at. So some clients, we get clients of all kinds where, for example, one client just purchased a website, and so they have a lot of existing content, existing traffic. One large client is spinning up a brand new project, so they're literally starting from zero, but they're doing it at such a huge scale that they want to see significant kind of growth over time, obviously. So it's a little different for everyone, but most of the stuff for us usually comes back to traffic and leads. So the type of work we do and the type of work content does is it gets the old story, it gets like the horse to water, but then sales teams need to get
the fish to the boat.
Yeah, exactly. So it's this handoff of like, we can get the right types of people to you, and that's our goal generally, and that should be the goal of content. Is you don't just want a ton of traffic if the leads aren't relevant, and so that happens all the time in B2B stuff where you're picking off topics that have super high volume, but it's like
nothing to do with the product.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't have a budget. The webinar, I think, is a perfect example of that, where the webinar is perfect for SMB people. It's not great for reaching high-level decision makers in huge companies. So it gives you this marketing vanity metric where it sounds good because you're getting so many people on a webinar and stuff, but is it actually like driving revenue? Probably not.
Does that drive you crazy? Because I'm sure you must get that they count numbers instead of the quality. If they want the C-suite versus the recent grad.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough too. The toughest thing for us is when people internally aren't on the same team. So in other words, like because sometimes we will talk to like a salesperson, a product person, a marketing person, and possibly even like a C-suite person, and they each have like a different perspective of what the goal is, and that's impossible for any external agency, not just us. And that's usually where we run into issues where it's like we think we're doing a good job, and we try to measure that internally, regardless of what the client wants. But in an ideal world, we want to just align with whatever the client wants. So if they tell us we're doing this for traffic, then we'll optimize for traffic, because ultimately we're just trying to help them do what they're telling us.
Get their goal.
Yeah, it's tough for any external company or anything to fix internal, company issues.
And how about advertising the content? Is that something that you do?
Yeah, we do a lot. So we do. We can get really nerdy with this, but we do like top of the funnel retargeting campaigns based on, I shouldn't say retargeting, but we'll take audiences they might already have. So we'll take like a big customer database, for example, everyone who's ever got a free trial, and then we'll create lookalike audiences from that, and then we'll run top of the funnel content to those people, because in all likelihood it's a better cold audience. We'll also do a lot of retargeting campaigns, so more like case study information, pricing calculators or tools. We'll do all that stuff to middle, bottom of the funnel people. So maybe they've been to the website a few times. We could target people who've been to specific URLs. So especially with things like Facebook and LinkedIn, for instance. You could say, if someone's looked at our product page or our service pages, or maybe they've even been to like a quote page, but they haven't filled it out, give me those people, and that's where I can tailor the content much better to them. So we run a lot of different types of social campaigns like that. This type of stuff, podcasts are great for just engagement. So you can kind of run those for anyone. You can run them for customers that have been with you for a while because you don't want them to churn, but you could also run them to top of the funnel, people who visited your website once and bounced after.
And do you recommend podcasts to your clients as far as either start their own or be guests on others?
Yeah, we're doing a lot more of that.
Yeah.
We're trying to set it up in such a way where a lot of companies will kind of almost outsource a lot of the creation to us, and so we're trying to set up in such a way where we can either interview their people and turn that into something, or even use the content. So if we write 3,000 words on something, we should be able to internally turn that into design assets, audio assets, video assets. And so that's another next kind of level that we're working towards and trying to help other people work towards is take, you don't always need 10,000 articles on a website. You might need 100, but you need to make those 100 really, really, really good. And so the way you do that is by layering in all these other things and then being consistent in your messaging. So if you have 100 core concepts and you're going to guest somewhere, you're going to write articles on columns for different websites, they need to all relate back to those same themes that you're pounding over here on your site.
Yeah, because I always find it weird what marketing people will spend money on and what they won't. Where they'll spend a fortune on a webinar and get 500 people, but then you have a podcast that has 10 or 100 times the audience, where know, like, and trust is already established and a habit is already established. And they go, I don't know about podcasts. It's like, what's the difference?
It's
one you can ask questions at and the quality sucks, and the other one is quality's good and you can't ask questions.
I could talk about this forever, but I feel like the world is becoming more receptive to the idea of spending money on content. And I always relate it back to the asset concept or idea, because what commonly happens in marketing is that people will try to not spend a lot of money on the original content asset, but then they'll have to spend a ton of money on advertising and promotion because the content is so bad.
Yes.
And so if you just, and we've done a couple case studies to help illustrate this, but like if you just created like a video for one of your articles, and that video might cost a couple $100, it'll literally save you tens of thousands of dollars on advertising costs, because being able to use the video creative and be able to run better ads, your cost will come down so much on like a per click basis, a per lead basis. So it's kind of insane to me in that where people don't always think through how spending more money in one area can significantly reduce the money they're spending over here, or you have to spend a ton of money on distribution, link building, all the other things because your content's not any good.
Yeah, especially like in the SaaS space where there's lots of money, very little audience, because there's so many of them, and they start from nothing, and they come up with a product, and somebody else has that audience already. They already curated it over years. Leverage them. Instead of trying to hire somebody to manage a bunch of ads.
Yeah, totally.
I see the salary that they're paying the guy to manage the ads, give that money to somebody who already has that audience to promote you.
Yeah, definitely. And it is, like you're, especially in the SaaS space, it's very winner take all. It's a very red.
Yes, it is.
A lot of red oceans, which is good for us in a way, because it means like people have to spend more money on all this stuff. But I agree with you in that it's where that money goes is a huge key to that people don't always understand. And even we do a lot of like link building and other stuff too, because of where we sit in the market, and we know a lot of people, and it's amazing how, like, for us, a simple, like, we could just send an email and get results like pretty quickly, because we're in the right position. And it's an uphill battle if you don't have those kind of inroads already. And so where you're spending money, the impact of that money can vary wildly.
Right, because you're going to save them that year and a half of learning curve.
Yeah,
trial and error.
Exactly. Like if it's an editor someone needs, we know editors. If it's a marketing team someone needs, we know marketing team. So it's like you're able, depending on how your distribution isn't just ads, I guess. Like distribution means how do I get yeah, exactly. How do I get a JV with this company in a similar space where we have the same audience, like you're saying? There's a lot of other ways to do it that people don't always kind of explore those options.
And that's it, because one big part of the marketing budget is now dead, right?
Yep,
Events.
for
There's
sure.
no-
Yes,
it's-
and going back to webinars, the decision makers who are going to go to offline events are still not going to online events. So it's not apples to apples where you're just going to say, okay, let's do our offline thing online.
yeah.
You're still going to run into the same problem. So it's not as simple as just putting that money into a webinar or an online event. It's no, that money needs to fundamentally go to a different direction because you're still not reaching those people.
Cool. Hey, it's been a fun conversation. Where can people go to follow you and learn more about your company?
The best place would be to our website. Our website is getcodeless.com. The name of our company is Codeless. And I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm not super social. So you can find me on LinkedIn at BS Marketer, I believe, is the LinkedIn URL. And that is because my initials are Brad Smith and not because I'm full
Because
of
you're
BS,
full of it.
but sometimes. So it works both ways, I guess.